Hey everybody, this is Tim with the University of Vinyl. Thanks for tuning in again. I'm on video number 8. And today we're going to take a deep dive into The Who's 1978 album, Who Are You? Sometimes when you get, you do a find or you purchase something and you put it on, it kind of takes you back and maybe sends you a little bit down the rabbit hole on a particular band. And that's kind of what happened with me when I purchased this pressing. This is the Classic Records. I think this was originally released in 2005, but this is their 200-gram audiophile, of course, pressing of Who Are You, cut from the original analog tapes. This is an outstanding pressing. It's the best way that I've heard this album. A little bit more about this actual release. Really nice heavy-duty cardboard. And of course, this is probably one of the more iconic album covers. One of my favorites. Of course, it's got the famous shot in the middle there of Keith Moon. He's sitting in the chair saying not to be taken away. I think everybody knows now that when this album was originally released August 18th, 1978, and Keith Moon died on September 7th, 1978. So literally about 3 weeks after this album was released, Keith Moon was gone, which is too bad because everything that you read about that, he had been working on himself a little bit, trying his best, was on some medication, trying to wean himself off of alcohol, pills, etc. And it just didn't work out that way, which is too bad. About this album, there are mixed reviews all over the internet on Who Are You. I'm of a similar opinion. I think it's a strong album. There are a few songs on here that are not my favorites. I think there's 2 or 3 standout tracks on each side of the album. We're going to talk about it a little bit today. But a little bit of background. When this came out in 1978, they had actually started recording this in the late summer of 1977. And Townsend, as usual, had a little bit of an identity crisis at that point in time. He was concerned about, is The Who still relevant? Am I still relevant? Do I know, how to write a song that could be put across as a Who song? If we look back 3 years prior to the Who by Numbers album, and I've got an original US release of that, which sounds fine. Of course, that iconic cover by John Entwistle supposedly only cost 32 pounds as far as the creation of the cover compared to Quadrophenia. Entwistle, you can find it online. He said it cost, the creation of that cover cost 16,000 pounds or something. But turning back to Pete Townsend and his kind of inner struggles and the way he was thinking at the time, this album was one of the more personal releases that the Who ever did as far as Pete Townsend's writing for the Who. Songs like However Much I Booze, Dreaming from the Waste, Imagine a Man, How Many Friends, and In a Hand or a Face. There's a lot of people that were saying, geez, maybe this should be a Pete Townsend solo album. I'm not sure if this comes across well. Actually, I think it's a really strong album. Of course, it had Slip Kid on it as well, and Squeezebox was the lead single, which did well. A little bit of a tongue-in-cheek song. But anyway, this was from 1975, and they took a long break. Movie projects. Entwistle was doing other gigging around solo, trying to put together a band. But finally, 3 years later came Who Are You? And like I was saying earlier, the recording started for this, I think it was September 1977. And if you think back to that point in time, what happened in 1977? Well, we have the Sex Pistols with their first album was released. The Clash came out with their first album. Iggy Pop's The Idiot came out. And Pete Townsend is a voracious music lover, and of course he knew what was going on, and he was listening to these bands and these songs and kind of witnessing the movement, the punk scene in London and Soho, etc. So he kind of felt a little bit behind the eight ball, felt a little confused as to, is The Who still relevant? Are we a dinosaur act at this point in time? Keep in mind, Pete Townsend, he was still in his early to mid 30s. So was the entire band at that point in time. So these guys were not old men by any reason. Although they had been at it, in 1978, they had been at it for a good 13, 14 years at that point in time. And this was their 8th studio album that they released. So let's talk about the music on Who Are You? And one of my favorite tracks is the lead-off track, which is New Song. And, with this track, I think The Who really set out to make a statement. I don't know exactly what was behind the sequencing of the album, but I thought this was a very strong start, track 1 on side 1. It kicked off with an incredible ballsy synthesizer and stinging guitar that kind of made, like I said, I think it makes a statement. 1975's The Who by Numbers was very, very acoustic based, a quiet album. Famously Blue and Gray had ukulele on it. And so flip the page to this album 3 years later, and they're making a strong statement. Pete's back with the synthesizers, and the electric guitar is in strong form. Very muscular start. Now, the other thing about New Song is going back to Townsend's mindset at the time and the cynicism. Think about some of these lyrics. So, I write the same old song and a few new lines, and everybody wants to cheer it. I write the same old song you heard a good few times. Admit you really want to hear it. So that's kind of a swipe at AOR rock and roll and FM radio playlists at the time. And Townsend worried that I'm just kind of changing up a few tunes, and we're changing the key and a couple different power chords, and it's the same old song. Anyway, I think it's a great track. I love that song, and it's a great way to kick off this album. Let's take a look at some other songs on this album as well. Where are we? So track 2, Had Enough. I think this is kind of a plodding song, to be honest. This is one of 3 John Entwistle compositions that showed up on this album. Usually he would only be given 1 or 2, and on this album he actually had 3, which is a little bit different. In my research, and if you listen to that song, it's got a very intricate string background arrangement that's been tacked onto the song. And apparently Roger Daltrey didn't like it when he heard a playback on it, and but it stayed as it was released, and it's got a heavy string arrangement, which is a little bit different for a John Entwistle composition. The other thing about Had Enough is it actually appeared on the flip side of the Who Are You single. So it was the B-side for Who Are You when it was released as a single. Number 3 track on side 1 is Sister Disco. Very recognizable for that very, very busy synth line that goes throughout the song. It was a regular. It showed up regularly in their live set list in 1979, 1980, 81. Also, the first farewell tour in '82. So that was usually always in the set list, Sister Disco. My favorite part of this song, if you get to the last 50 seconds, there's going to be a synth outro which leads into a beautiful Pete Townsend acoustic guitar outro. And it just it dwindles down, and it's just a cool way to end a track, and it's really pretty. Sister Disco. Track number 4, this is the jazzy, 6/4 time Music Must Change. And the famous story about this song is that Keith Moon was so confused and just kind of wasn't getting this song in particular, and he couldn't come up with anything as far as what to put down on drums. So if you go back and listen to that song, there is no drums. There's no drum track. There's a few cymbal flourishes, and that is it. So Keith Moon basically sat out that track, and they decided to kind of release it that way. It's got a real jazzy feel to it. It's one of the stronger songs on the album, in my opinion. So if we flip the album over and go back to side 2 now, we're starting out with another Entwistle song, Trick of the Light. And Trick of the Light is an ode to a prostitute, which is a little bit ironic. Everybody knows, when John Entwistle died, supposedly he was in the arms of a prostitute in the Hard Rock Hotel in Las Vegas in 2002. So some irony here. It's a very heavy track. The Aux is using an 8-string alembic bass, and it really kind of is almost too heavy for this album. But I think it's a strong track. I've got to skip back to side 1. I actually forgot Entwistle's 905, which is between Had Enough and Sister Disco on side 1. This is that sci-fi thing, which was kind of foretelling at the time. Entwistle came up with this song about, a human being conceived in a test tube and, brought to the earth that way, which is kind of interesting. It's a very, it had a different sound to that song, heavy electronics, but I really liked it. So that's 905. Sorry to skip back. Trick of the Light. This song actually figured in live set lists for The Who for quite a while. You can actually find a 1989 version of that song, which is really great. Could do a search on YouTube for Glen Falls 1989 Who run through, and you'll find it. They did some rehearsals up in Glen Falls, New York, apparently as part of the '89 tour, the big reunion tour. It had Simon Phillips on drums at that point in time. 2 more songs on side 2. The next 2 songs are Guitar and Pen and Love Is Coming Down. Neither of these songs do much for me. They're perfectly constructed and pretty intricate songs, but I'm just checking my notes on this. There's strings on Love Is Coming Down as well. Very introspective Townsend song. Could have showed up. Maybe it's a leftover from The Who by Numbers. I don't know. But Guitar and Pen and Love Is Coming Down didn't do a whole lot for me. So that's kind of where this album falls down a little bit for me. And then, of course, we've got to, the main attraction to this album is that lead single, Who Are You? The last track on side 2, one of the best songs the Who have ever recorded. This thing starts off with that incredible synthesizer and, again, stinging guitar by Townsend. Some heavy guitar riffs. And, famously, this song was written by Pete after a night out in Soho in London. It's a famous story. He was on a bender and actually ran into 2 of the Sex Pistols, Steve Jones and Paul Cook, I think. And what happened was this song came out of it, and thank God we have it. It's a great song. But that opening lyric, it basically tells all you need to know and tells a story. I woke up in a Soho doorway. A policeman knew my name. He said, "You can go to sleep at home tonight if you can get up and walk away." So Roger Daltrey, one of his best vocal performances on this album. When this thing was released, they had to have, it was one of the first of the kind, I think. There was an explicit warning because of, we're at the very end of Who Are You? Daltrey's going, who the fuck are you? But anyway, I digress. That is Who Are You in a nutshell. I think it's a strong Who album. It's not their strongest, absolutely not. This, is important because it's the last album that had Keith Moon. And a lot of people will say, was this the last real Who album? If we think about Face Dances with Kenny Jones on drums, is that really the Who? I don't know. I'm going to withhold judgment on it. Of course, Keith Moon can never be replaced, but Face Dances has some strong pieces on it that I really enjoy. Of course, then after Face Dances came It's Hard, more of a mediocre album in my opinion. After that, there were the later period Who albums, Endless Wire from 2003. I'd have to check on the year. Not a great album. And then in the fall of January of 2020, right before the pandemic, they came out with Who, the self-titled album, which is a pretty strong album, pretty interesting. I'm actually still getting into that. It takes a while to get into any Who album. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of stop by and talk about this album. This was the Classic Records 2005 reissue of Who Are You. Can't recommend this higher. This is super dynamic, beautiful packaging, the best that I've ever heard these songs before. So hey, thanks very much for watching. I appreciate your time, and if you'd like to subscribe, I'll be doing more of these. Take care. Bye.